Welcome to a new archetype breakdown. Today we're going to take a look at the last archetype that we haven't got to talk about from Tactical Masters, of course, and that is Runick. Now, Runick is a very interesting archetype for it being the first, I think, like actual official built-in deck or engine, even as deck destruction engine, as you will see when we'll talk about it. If you don't know these cards specifically and you haven't got the chance to deal with them yet, although I doubt it. But the point is, this archetype is an archetype that I have very mixed feelings about when we will talk about it, when we will get to it. But before we jump right into the video itself, I'm going to remind you that if you want to see more videos like this and help support the channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It's helped a ton. You have no idea how. It's just helped me motivate me to want to create more videos. Let me know in the comments down below what your feelings about this archetype and if there was something certainly that I missed about it. And of course, give a like to the video if you enjoyed just my explanation. You don't have to like the archetype, just if you enjoyed the explanation, because I know this archetype is a pretty tough cookie to some people to swallow. But without further ado, let's jump right into the review itself. So what exactly is Runick? Well, Runick is, as I mentioned before at the start of the video, a deck destruction archetype. The entire idea is just using your cards, stall the game as much as possible. Of course, if you're able to, if you die, you die. But the point is, you stall the game as much as you can to banish the top cards of your opponent's deck, essentially with your card effects, until they basically scoop or they deck out. And this is kind of like an archetype that is basically a mixed bag because of this particular thing, without even a certain card, which we'll get to it for the suggested cards. Because of the fact that you basically take your opponent's resources from them, which is not fun for anybody. That cards that you want to play with or cards that you can actually use maybe to deal with this archetype are getting banished immediately and you have nothing to do against. That's why this archetype is like kind of a mixed bag, because people who love to play this archetype love this archetype, and when you play it, it's actually fun. But when your opponent dealing with this or you're dealing with this, can be absolutely miserable. So it's a little bit of a polarizing archetype, not as bad without a certain card as I mentioned before, but it still could be very, very polarizing. Now, as for the archetype itself, the archetype is based around three types of cards. You have your extra deck fusion monsters, you have your spells that are not quick play spells, and of course you have your main category of cards that are supposed to help you, which is the quick play spells. Now, the quick play spells all have basically two effects, which they share, kind of like a part of an effect they share, and then one of the effects that can activate it that they all share, which is basically you skip your next battle phase after the activation of this card, and then you can choose one of two effects. The first effect is their own individual effect, and after that individual effect is resolved, you also banish the top cards of your opponent deck up to like from the number that they were supposed to banish, which we'll get to those when we'll get to those. And then the other thing that they share is that it's allowing you to special summon Runick extra deck monster into your extra monster zone. Not your just special summon it, it's just to the extra monster zone, so you will not be able to spam with these too quickly and use these in maybe other combo decks to essentially just use this as an like engine rather than just like being like an actually what it's supposed to be, a stall archetype. Although they could have just solved this by just making these, I guess, lock you into Runick for the rest of the turn, but also I guess they wanted to just make Runick a little bit less polarizing, although it's still a little bit polarizing as I mentioned before. But yeah, that's kind of like the main gimmick of the archetype, just banishing your opponent's cards, stalling the game as much as possible, skip your battle phase because you don't really need it, you're just trying to focusing on killing your opponent by decking them out and taking the resources. But without out of the way and very lengthy explanation, we're actually going to get into the cards, and they're actually going to be quicker than you might think, because the quick play spells don't really have a lot of explanation about. But the first card that we're actually going to talk about first is not the quick play spell. Yes, I baited you. We're going to talk about the field spell, Runick Fountain, and Runick Allure. These two particular cards are the non-quick play spells of the archetype, and have their uses or importances. The Runick Fountain is, in my opinion, one of the most important cards of the deck, and the reason why the deck can actually function, because if you're just playing with quick play spells and you're trying to play a deck that is a destruction deck, you're basically going to run out of resources in the end and you don't really have anything to actually do. But that's where the field spell come in, because this card says that when you activate, you can activate a quick play spell, for Runick quick play spell, from your hand during your opponent's turn, meaning that you don't have to set them to your side of the field. Now, of course, you can set some of these to be safe if your opponent have, like, for example, you're not sure if they don't have Cosmic Cyclone or Lightning Storm to just deal with your field spell, but essentially, the fact that you're able to play with these from your hand is just making your plays a little bit more versatile and less depending on your opponent not having, like, a backer removal that removes everything, and then your deck is dead. The other thing that this card is just also really good for is that when you activate a Runick quick play spell, you can target up to 3 Runick quick play spells in your graveyard and then place them on the bottom of your deck in any order and then draw the same amount of cards that you put on the bottom of your deck for your Runick quick play spells, giving you the ability to just keep reloading yourself over and over again and essentially keep the archetype going. So that's why this card is very important. The other card which I mentioned is the continuous spell Runick Allure. This card allowing you that each time a quick play spell card activated, not just the Runick quick play spells, you're able to banish the top card of your opponent's deck. And you can only control one of these because otherwise this card will have been absolutely broken. If you control all 3 of them, you basically just destroy your opponent's deck entirely, almost like this. Because you do have a way to tutor this and the field spell, which we'll get to them. But the idea is that the field spell is your main important card, because this is the card that could keep and sustain your archetype over and over again, because you just, during your opponent's turn or during your own turn after you use all of your cards, you basically shuffle the 3 cards that you haven't used to your deck, draw 3, and there you go, you have a full hand to basically use and essentially use against your opponent every single time if you draw into your Runick cards, so that's pretty good. I'm going to give the field spell 5 stars. This card is the most important card, let's be honest, of the archetype. If you don't have this field spell, you basically just have nothing going on for you, because, let's be honest, like I said, you need to reload every single time. There is ways to get into it, as we'll talk about those, but yeah, this is the most important card. As for Allure, it is a cool card, it is okay, but it's not really as that important as you might think. I'm going to give this one a 2. Mostly you just play it as 1 anyway, just a card that is searchable and it's fine. It's not even your main win condition. Like, banishing the additional top card of your deck on top of your actual effects is definitely can come a long mile, but it's not really your main gimmick or what you're trying to get to. After you get into your field spell, you get to discard. So that's why this card is less important than your field spell. Still very okay though, and kind of like in theme of the deck destruction aspect, but it's not the most important card out of the strategy. Like, sometimes people even just don't run it or just run it at 1. Even some people run it 2 just in order to see it, but there's really no reason to run more one of this. This is a recyclable card, worst case scenario, and you can only control 1 anyway, so this is just completely fine. As for your quick play spells, which is the second category, this particular category is going to be a breeze because I basically explain almost everything about this particular cards. That just skip your next battle phase, and part of their effects is that you basically special summon a Runick monster from your extra deck to your extra monster zone. The other effects that they all have individually are the following. We're going to go from top left to bottom right in order, just for you if you cannot read the names, because there are 8 of these and I'm pretty sure I made these a little bit small. So Runick Tip is in the top left, and the last card on the top right is the last card, which is called Smithing Storm. So we're going to go from Runick Tip to Smithing Storm. As for Runick Tip, this is basically your quick play spell that also is your searcher. It's allowing you to add a Runick from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself, and then you banish 1 card from your opponent's deck. That's that. Because it's a search card, they just give this to banish 1 card from your opponent's deck. Or should I say the top card of your opponent's deck. The next card, Flashing Fire, allowing you to target a special summon monster your opponent control, destroy it, and then banish the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. Destruction, allowing you to target 1 spell trap card your opponent control, destroy it, and then banish the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck. Sorry. And then you have Dispelling, which is a very interesting one, which is pretty cool, but I don't think is really that good. And that card says that if your opponent add a card from their deck to their hand, except during the draw phase, you can discard 1 random card from their hand and then banish the top 2 cards of their deck on top of that. As for Freezing Curses, allowing you to target 1 effect monster your opponent control, negate its effect until the end of this turn, and then banish the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Runick Slumber, allowing you to target a face-up monster on the field. The next time that monster will be destroyed by a by card effect. This turn, it is not destroyed. Also, cannot attack this turn, and then after applying this effect, banish the top 3 cards of your opponent deck. So it can also be used in order to protect your own cards, like, let's say, after your opponent just, like, trying to destroy things, with, like, maybe access code, I guess, but then again, access code cannot be responded. I don't know. The point is just preventing maybe your monster to be destroyed, or just your opponent from attacking with a certain monster. Regardless, that's kind of the point. And then the second to last one, Golden Droplets, allowing your opponent to draw a card and then banish the top card of their deck, the 4 top cards of their deck. So it's also supposed to work really well with Dispelling. You activate Droplets, they draw a card that is not during the draw phase, and then you basically activate Dispelling on top of that to banish a random card of their hand, so they wouldn't get any resource, and then essentially combine, you banish 6 cards. So that's kind of their point. And then Smithing Storm, which is the last one that we're talked about, is allowing you to banish cards from the top of your opponent's deck up to the number of cards they control. So it's essentially supposed to be your big finisher as an overall. So, what do I think about these cards? Well, let's be honest, Runick Tip is 5 stars. It's a very important card. You have to play this at 3. 100% is just a card that keeps the deck afloat, and essentially just giving you what you need. Flashing Fire, Destruction, and Freezing Curses are your better Runick spells, because they're essentially proactive to destroy your opponent's spells and traps, negate their effect, or destroy special summon monsters. They're all getting a 4. They're basically excellent cards to just deal with your opponent's stuff. As for the rest, we have Slumber, which I'm going to give a 3. I think just protecting our monster sometimes from battle or destruction, or even just like prevent your opponent monster to attack, is actually not as bad. It's not amazing, but it's not really that bad. And then for the other ones, well, we do have Dispelling, we do have Golden Droplets, and Smithing Storm. I think Golden Droplets and well, how they're called, Dispelling, I think they're all going to get 1 star from me. Some people would say that they're still running these as maybe as one-off just in order to have the names, but I think it's really dependent. If you're playing the pure variant, definitely playing these as one-off, so maybe they can be considered as 2, but they're so really situationally dependent. Worst case scenario, I guess you can just use these to be your cards as special summon cards from the extra Monster Zone, or Runick monster from the extra Monster Zone, so you actually don't use your good spells that you actually want in your hand, and you essentially use your bad ones to special summon the Runick Fusion monster to your extra Monster Zone and get what you need. So there are some particular points and merit for that, but if you're playing this as more of an engine archetype, which we'll get to that as well, I do not recommend to play these cards anyway, so that's why I'm giving them a 1. As for Smithing Storm, I don't know, it's an interesting finisher. I'm going to give it a 2. I think in the pure version it's a lot better, and it's in engines it's a little bit worse. It's okay. Runick Storm Smithing Storm is fine. It's not amazing, it's an okay finisher, it's just not as reactive as the other ones, which I think are really, really better, as Tip, Freezing, Flame, and the last one, which I forgot about that one. The one that destroys spells and traps. Those are the better one, in my opinion. But that does it for the quick play spells. Now we can actually jump into the fusion monsters. The fusion monsters that we got in this particular set, we got 3 of them. We got Hagen, we got Manin, and we got Gary, I think? Gary, I think the name of that one. You got the 2 Runick Wings and the 1 Runick Fang. The other Runick Fang we're supposed to get in Darkwing Blast, which we'll talk about him by himself, because he's a card by himself, because it's not out yet. But those 3 particular cards are 3 options that right now in the TCG, you're able to special summon them out of your extra deck when you activate the second parts of your quick play spells. In the case of Hagen, she's a really, really important one, because if this card is special summoned from the extra deck, you get to discard any card from your hand and then add a Runick field spell. Very important, because you want to have your field spell from your deck to your hand. This is not a once per turn effect, by the way. So you do have the ability to activate this multiple times, as long, of course, that you're getting the Hagen off your extra Monster Zone, because, you know, you have to summon the fusion monsters into your extra Monster Zone. The other thing that this card has is that if another card you control will be destroyed by card effect, you can banish this card you control instead, and if this card on the field is destroyed by battle by card effect, you're able to return this card to the extra deck. Very, very cool card, giving you protection and everything of that nature, but the point is, the main thing about this card is that it searches your field spell. As for Manin, the Runick Wings, the other one, this one is the same thing as Hagen, but not search your Runick field spell, it search your Runick continuous spell from your deck to your hand, so basically, Runick Allure. In this particular case, because we don't really have any other option. When your opponent activates a card or effect that target a Runick card you control, or a set card you control, so any set card, I guess, you're able to banish this card from you control, negate the activation, and if you do, you destroy that card. And then once per turn during the end phase, you gain 1,000 life. So basically, it's giving you the ability to essentially just gain life points and maybe even win in time, which is another really annoying thing about this archetype, that they also have a win in time button, which is Munin, so that's actually extra hilarious. But the reason why this card is also pretty good, not because of the fact that it could search your continuous spells, but it can actually protect your field spell if your opponent's trying to be smart and playing something like Cosmic Cyclone, because Cosmic Cyclone is basically a targeting effect to banish. Because Hagin protects from destruction, this protects from negation. So that is a pretty cool things between these two. As for Gary the Runick Fangs, this one is a pretty interesting one as well, because it cannot be destroyed by card effect, and if this card is special summoned, this is basically, special summon of course from the extra deck, this is basically a card that allowing you to target a non-quick play spell Runick spell in your graveyard, meaning that you can recycle your spells that are not, your field spell or your continuous spell back to your hand. So this card is just really good for that, and then when this card is destroyed by battle, you can target one card in the field and destroy it, which is just making this card pretty nice. So, in my opinion, Runick Fang is just a good boy to just help you just get the resources that you need back. The main one is definitely Hagin, which is going to get 5 stars because she searched your field spell. What his name again? Munin is going to get 3 because he's decent. He's just a good in time / search if you need to, the continuous spell Allure, and also just protect your cards from being targeted, so it's completely fine. And then Fangs is also going to get a 3 because it's just good recycling card as an overall, and just also destroy a card when it's get destroyed by battle, so that's also really cool. But that does it for these fusion monsters that we got in this set. As for the fusion monsters that we got in the, well, we're going to get, I guess, in Darkwing Blast, we have Furky the Runick Fangs, which is the big one. This particular card is a pretty cool one, because this card says the following, that if attack is declared involving this card in the extra monster zone, you can manage the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. So basically, if your opponent attack into it, they're losing 2 cards immediately if they're not dealing with it. This card also make that you don't take any battle damage, or neither player take any battle damage from battles involving this card. So basically, it's mostly for you because you are going to just skip your next battle phase every single time. And if this card is on the field destroyed by battle by a card effect, you get to target a Runick quick play spell in your graveyard and add it back to your hand, giving you a card that is just very annoying to deal with. And if they're removing it, you're still getting a quick play spell that can get you what you need to, and or again, giving you another resource that just banish your opponent top decks anyway. So if they're trying to remove it by card effect, oh hey, I'm getting a quick play spell that I need. Maybe I can summon it back once again, because that quick play spell can just give me the ability to special summon another one of these in the extra monster zone. It's just really stupid, and this card is very cool. I'm going to give this one a 4. I think it's really decent. It's basically, I think, your more payoff of a fusion monster that you want to summon into your extra monster zone and just keep it there, because the protections are nice, but this one can also just be your main big boy that just sit on the field, and your opponent just going to have a little bit more of a hard time to deal with, because if they deal with it from battle, they lose 2 cards, and if they don't, and if they deal with it through any other means and also just battle by itself and dies, you're also getting another quick play spell. So that's pretty cool. I would not say it's as good as the other support cards that we got for Labyrinth specifically and Violence, because I think this is definitely not as good as them, but it's still a very good addition for the Runick archetype nevertheless. But that does it for the Runick cards. Yeah, not as much as to explain as the other 2 archetypes. Still a lot to explain though, I'm not saying that. But this particular archetype, like I said, is more of the stall version. So as for the strength and weaknesses of this archetype, I'm pretty sure you already can guess. The strength of this archetype is stalling, banishing your opponent's main resources, and essentially just having the ability to basically make all of your spells into hand traps if you have the field spell on. The weaknesses of the archetype, however, is that if you have ways to deal with their quick play spells, or just dismantle their field before they're able to activate their quick play spells, or protection, sorry, I don't know why I had that burp for a second, but anyway, if you're dealing with their quick play spells, you're just able to just deal with them, you can negate them maybe, and if you deal with their field spell, they're basically not able to do anything, and they run out of resources. You can also dismantle their field pretty easily, and the fact that they do skip their battle phase is a very big weakness, because they don't really have the ability to remove your monsters more than just one a turn due to their own effects of their, quick play spells. Because if they don't play an additional engine, their quick play spells are all hard ones per turn, so they only have the ability to destroy one special summon monster, negate one special summon monster, or negate one opponent monster, and destroy one spell or trap, which are the main cards. The rest of the cards are good, but you can always just play around them. If you don't also banish your main resource points, or you're playing a deck that doesn't really care about that, that's also one downside. But yeah, overall this archetype is pretty interesting, all things considered. But now let's talk about cards that are supposed to help this archetype. Yes, I know people don't like this archetype, and I myself have, like I said, mixed feelings about this archetype, but I still want to give options for people who want to play this archetype for fun. Not with the other card that we're going to talk about in this section in a little bit, but the first archetype that you can just splash this with is the obvious one, Sky Strikers. Sky Strikers like spells. This is a quick play spell archetype as well, and Sky Strikers can also give you basically the backbone to essentially kind of protect yourself, as well just in general, just giving you additional really good, powerful quick play spell cards. Now it does conflict with this archetype, the fact that you basically are going to use the extra monster zone a lot, because Sky Strikers also have this thing that they use the extra monster zone for, they have to have the extra monster zone for their, let's say, Kagari and all these particular stuff, so they need to have the main monster zone empty. But that conflict can be played around, so it's not really as bad as you might think, so that's completely okay. As for the next archetype that you can play with this is actually the Fabled archetype. And the reason why the Fabled archetype works really well with this archetype is basically because of the fact that your Huggin and Muggin has the ability to or Manin should I say, have the ability to basically discard cards. And if you discard your Cerberus or your any other tuners, you're basically able to special summon a Fable tuner to your side of the field because of their effect, and you didn't lose a resource. And on top of that, you can maybe summon a Synchro monster, free your extra monster zone, and then special summon another monster that you want in your extra monster zone, and prefer more than your, let's say, your Huggin or Manin on your side of the field, and essentially maybe even get a negate on top of everything in actually monsters form. So that's pretty cool as well. Another archetype that you can actually use is Magical Musket. It's a cool one, I guess, because they're both use actual cards from the hand, so that can be also additional really cool. Another archetype that just help you just use basically your entire hand as hand trap, so there are some particular points for that, and because of the fact that you can also activate your quick play spells in their zones, that in the same column of your Magical Muskets, you're basically able to get their additional effects, which is also pretty nice. And essentially, again, Magical Muskets is an archetype that stalls. Another archetype that you can use is basically Dogmatica, because Dogmatica doesn't really need the extra deck, which is something that they don't really use that much, and they're also just a great stalling archetype with things like Dogmatica Punishment and things like that as well. And this archetype does need some specific cards in the extra deck, but not all of them, and you can just play additional more resources that's supposed to help you deal with your opponent. The last archetype that I would suggest is, well, Despia/Brandon. It can also work in this archetype because it's a fusion archetype, so there are some particular things that this archetype can also just do with them, I guess, and essentially just help you play as an overall. Although I do think that Dogmatica and Branded are a little bit more of a stretch, there's still a really cool options that I've seen been running around. As for the other suggested card, which a lot of people are running around with, the card that I don't really like, and I still have to suggest, because I feel like, people will ask me why I'm not suggesting this card, and that is Mystic Mine with Demise of the Land. I really hate this card. I hate this card with a passion, but I cannot deny the fact that it just makes this deck really effective. Because you just basically play Mystic Mine during the opponent's turn, they not do anything, and then during your own turn, you basically get the Runick things back or the field spell whenever you need to, and you also tag with Demise of the Land whatever you need to specifically, and essentially just use your quick play spells and then recover everything back, and then just stall your opponent until you actually banish their entire deck, because your opponent just not be able to almost respond into Mystic Mine, which is absolutely ridiculous, and because Demise of the Land, it just becomes even worse. This card needs to get banned. I don't know why this card is still here. I don't know why this card still exists and Konami thinks this is a good idea. Please, for the love of God, Konami, get rid of this card in the next ban list. If you don't, I don't know what are you thinking. I even just create even an own section for this card that is not forbidden. It's just called mistakes. So you can put cards that you're not really proud of, but you're trying to do something cool with there and will not be angry with you. Because this card, I think, had a cool idea, but it's just absolutely disgusting and terrible. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. I don't want to see it anymore. I'm hoping it will be forbidden just like in the OCG and prevent a lot of headaches coming up. The other two cards that I would suggest is basically additional, floodgates options. There can be only one and skill drain, because you don't really care about your monster effects that much because you use quick play spell for the most part, and there can be only one is just, you're only just going to control one monster, maybe two monsters, but one of them is going to be a fairy and one of them is going to be a beast. So you don't really care about there can be only one at all. It just more hurt your opponent than you, so yeah, floodgates. That's kind of fun, I guess. Not. But anyway, those are particular options that you can also use as well. But that does it for the cards that are good in this archetype. Now let's talk about the main thing that people care about, and that's cards that can use against this archetype. And these particular cards are the first one, Artifact Lancia, because you can just prevent them from banishing your own cards. Just having something like that just meaning, oh hey, you cannot banish my cards, have fun. Basically, you're still getting your effect, you still skip your battle phase, but my deck is safe. So Artifact Lancia is a pretty good option. Ash Blossom, Ghost Ogre, Draw and Lockbird are also really good cards. Ghost Ogre to deal with the field spell upon activation or when it activates its effect and they don't have protection with it. Sometimes they do, but it is what it is. Ash Blossom just to deal with their searching, and Draw and Lockbird to just prevent them to continue searching and maybe even, should I say, use their field spell effect to draw more cards. Because you can just, basically they search with tip, you activate Draw and Lockbird, you can shut down their entire turn and they basically can just be done with it, because if they're not getting the field spell or anything, on top of that, just Draw can just shut the entire turn. So, yeah, that could be really good against this. As for additional cards, Lightning Storm, Cosmic Cyclone, Forbidden Droplets, I think I don't need to explain these that much. Cosmic Cyclone and Lightning Storm to just deal with things, and Droplets, if you discard a spell and a monster, they basically not able to do anything because you just target the field spell is negated, they're not getting anything back, and then you just target a monster that is an annoying monster, you get rid of that effect, let's say Huggin or Munin, and essentially you just then target the field spell, pop it, and that's it, or just get rid of it. It's just really good to deal with these particular cards. I know Droplets is expensive, but hopefully in the Mega 10 we're going to get an actual, just decently priced Droplets. Doubt it, but hopefully we will. And the last card, of course, if you're going first, Anti-Spell Fragrance, because this entire deck is based on quick play spells, so get rid of them. Just don't deal with them whatsoever. It's pretty good, so that's kind of fun. But that's pretty much does it for the cards to use against, and does it for the archetype as a whole. Honestly, I don't really have a lot to say about this archetype. This archetype is going to get a 4 from me. I think by itself, it's the strongest archetype out of the 3 because of what it does. And just in general, it's just the most solid one and can be splashed into other decks as like a particular stall engine. But because of Mystic Mind, this archetype could get also a 5, but because I hate Mystic Mind with a passion, and I hope it's going to get banned, I'm just going to give it a 4. But by itself, like I said, this archetype is actually pretty okay. I don't really like this deck destruction archetypes, but I think it's not as bad. Because of Mystic Mind, this archetype is really annoying. So please, Konami, get rid of it, and I think we'll have a decently annoying rogue archetype that stalls, but you can actually deal with. With Mystic Mind, it's absolutely impossible. So, yeah, it is what it is. But that's pretty much does it for the video and does it as an overall. Hope you learned something. Hope you basically maybe learned the cards that can actually help you deal with this deck, because this deck can be really frustrating. I understand that. But that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this archetype as a whole, or if I missed something. But that's pretty much it for me. Bye-bye.